Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's head coach video conference for the 2021 CFP semifinal at the Rose Bowl game presented by Capital One. Today's conference will feature Alabama head coach Nick Saban, followed by Notre Dame head coach Brian Kelly. Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's head coach video. We'll start with an opening statement from Coach Saban, and we'll then open up the floor for questions. Coach Saban, go ahead.
Well, we're certainly excited. Our team is very excited about having the opportunity to play in the, Rose Bowl, sponsored by Capital One. It's kind of an honor for us to play against a very well-coached Notre Dame team. Brian Kelly's team has had an outstanding season. Very, very good team. Our team has had a really good week of preparation, and, we're kind of looking at this because of the sort of unusual season that we're having, even for bowl games, is just going today as if this is a normal road trip for us, but certainly not a normal game for us, and something our players are excited about and really fortunate to have the opportunity to play in the college football playoff.
Thank you, Coach Saban. As a reminder, please raise your hand to ask a question. When it is your turn, your name will be called, and then you can unmute your microphone. We'll start with Chris Daly.
Hey, Coach, you guys are 19.5-point favorites coming into the game. Do you worry about your players reading this and taking Notre Dame too lightly, and how do you prevent this as a coach?
Well, I think that we're always concerned. I always tell our players that, they really shouldn't listen to what people say externally, and really stay focused on what you have to do internally to be able to play your best football. I think, this program is built on, players being accountable to do their job at a high level and to be accountable to each other. And really what other people think and say really doesn't have anything to do with, the outcome of the game. So we want to stay focused on, the things that we have to do to get the proper outcome, for our team, with great respect for the team that we have to play, and know that we're going to have to stay focused, one play at a time, and do a great job of executing to be able to have success anytime you play against a really good team. So, we try to keep our players from all external sort of, factors out there that really don't have any significance on the outcome of the game.
Our next question will come from Ron Wallace.
Good morning, Coach. Ron Wallace with Ball and Down South Sports Network. First, before I ask my question, how are you doing this morning, Coach?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Pretty good, Coach. Going over to the season, you guys are 11-0 overall, 10-0 in the conference, on 11-game winning streak. Your lowest game, and I would say your closest game this year, was against Missouri, which was the first game of the season, 38-19 win. After that, you guys scored over 40 points or more in all your rest of your games. How do you keep your guys to stay focused on the task that's at hand and not think that, it's going to be easy, or even, should I say, a cakewalk to the title game?
Well, really, when you play sports, you're really only good as your last game. You're really only good as your last play. So, we try to keep our players looking forward at the next challenge, understand what they have to do to prepare to be able to execute and play well, create value for themselves. These guys have worked hard to put themselves in this position. So you certainly want to be able to finish correctly. And what you've done in the past doesn't have anything to do with what's going to happen in the future. So if you can remember what you did to have success in the past and continue to do that, that's going to help you continue to have success. Success is, not a continuum. It's momentary, and it's always based on the next moment. So that's what we try to get our players to focus on.
Our next question comes from Jeff Spiegel.
Good morning, Nick.
Morning.
I've heard former players say that you're really good at giving pregame speeches. Are those crafted, mentally a couple of days beforehand, or is that a spontaneous thing? And is a playoff pregame speech, does that carry maybe a little more intensity than one in the regular season?
Well, you know, every game is important. Every game is important to be able to get to this point. This is the next game. It's the most important game because it is the next game. So I like to be intense. I wouldn't like the players to say that, well, coach is not very intense today, so this must not be a very important game. I think every game is important. Every game has significance. And, you know, we try to basically, to answer the first part of your question, I usually speak to the team, you know, the day before the game. And what I say to them in the locker room before we go out is really a small summarization of, you know, the points that we try to make in terms of what's important for us to be successful in this particular game, whether it's mindset or what we need to do to execute or critical points that'll, you know, affect the outcome of the game. So I guess I do that a day in advance, and I prepare it a day in advance.
Our next question comes from Stephen Smith.
How you feeling this morning, Coach?
Doing great, thank you.
Outstanding. Well, when you look at the secondary, as a sophomore, how have you seen Jordan Battle progress as a communicator and a play caller on that back end?
I think he's done a really good job this year, having limited experience going into the year in the entire secondary, as well as with Jordan Battle specifically. He's a bright guy. Really understands the concepts of what we're trying to do. Has become a much better leader and communicator in the secondary, which I think, you know, helps the other guys play better, which is always something that you'd like for your safeties to be able to do. But he's done that extremely well. And I think as he's gotten more knowledge and experience throughout the year, it's helped his confidence, which also helps his ability to communicate.
Our next question will be from Cecil Hurt.
Coach, you had several players who went home for Christmas, obviously, and came back. How has the testing protocol gone for players and staff? And do you expect everybody on the flight today?
Yeah, we haven't had any problems to this point. You know, I always knock on wood when I say that. Everybody that we expected to be on the trip will be on the trip.
Great. Thank you, Coach.
Our next question comes from AP Stedham.
Good morning, Coach.
Morning.
Coach, as the season progresses through a set of circumstances or maturity, someone emerges as a key performer. When you looked at the Notre Dame team, have you seen that type of player? And on your own team as well, few you might want to mention. And I want to ask you about the two tight ends for Notre Dame, number 24 Trimble, number 87 Mayer.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, all three of their tight ends play a significant role in their offense. They all play extremely well. They're very versatile players. I think their quarterback has played well. I think their offensive line has played well. I think their defense plays great team defense. They understand the scheme. They play hard. They play with toughness. So, you know, to single out one particular player that has emerged, you know, they have a 1,000-yard rusher. I mean, I could kind of go on and on and on. They have a 60 reception receiver. They have a lot of good players. They're very well coached, and they're a very good team. And I think like most teams, you know, every team sort of develops an identity, you know, as they go through the season. And I think this team has an identity. I think they're physical. They play with toughness. They play with great intangibles, discipline, give great effort. So have a lot of respect for the way they compete in the game as a total team.
Our next question comes from Mike Rodak.
Has there been any change in the status of LeBron Ray or Jalen Waddle this week? And is there any other injury issues entering the game?
No, there hadn't been any, you know, changes with those two guys. And, you know, we always have guys that are, you know, a little nicked up that we kind of make a decision in pregame warm-up if they'll be able to go or not. But we're hopeful that all those guys will be fine.
Our next question comes from Aaron Suttles.
You helped start Lance Taylor's coaching career. I wonder, back in 2007 when he was interviewing for that graduate assistant job, what you saw in him that gave him that opportunity.
Yeah, Lance Taylor is a great coach, fine young man. Obviously, was a contributor here at Alabama as a player, and certainly would have loved to have him be a part of our staff. Things just didn't work out the right way at the right time for him or for us, and he's done an outstanding job with the players that he's responsible for at Notre Dame.
Our next question comes from Ron Wallace.
Coach, another question. Ron Wallace with Ball Down South. With the players that you have injured, may not play in the game, have the other guys been able to use that as motivation going into this Rose Bowl game to help them bring home the victory to Alabama and get to that national championship game?
Well, yeah, I think, anytime you have a team and players have respect for each other, they certainly, have some emotion for guys that are going to be unable to play, knowing how important it is for those guys and for all of us to be accountable to each other. So I don't think there's any question about the fact that players have feelings and, want to be successful for their teammates, the ones that are playing and the ones that can't play. If you have good team chemistry, I think that's always going to be the case. And I think it's certainly the case with this team.
Again, as a reminder, please raise your hand to ask a question to Coach Saban. Do we have any addition? Oh, we have one more question. We have a question from AP Stedham.
Hey, Coach, I just wanted to ask you, your kicking game has been very solid this year from Will Reichard. Have you made a decision on the punter for this game? Is that a game time decision, or is that something you're still considering?
No, we like where we are. It's the consistency and direction where we kick the ball. Sometimes it's not as far as we'd like to be, but the hang time is good. We've been able to cover the kicks, so there's no changes going to be made in the punting.
Once again, as a reminder, please raise your hand to ask a question for Coach Saban. We don't have any more questions. I will conclude today's press conference with Coach Saban. Thank you for your time, Coach. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We will resume today's press conference at 9:25 with head coach of Notre Dame football, Brian Kelly. Until then, today's transcript will be available on collegepressbox.com, and the video will be available via the CFP media portal. This line will remain live until Coach Kelly gets on the line at 9:25. Thank you. As a reminder to everyone, we will begin with Coach Kelly at 9:25 a.m. Thank you.
Test 1, 2. Check. Get that Rose Bowl.
We'll now be joined by Notre Dame head coach Brian Kelly. We'll start with an opening statement from Coach Kelly, and we'll then open up the floor for questions. Go ahead, Coach.
Well, first of all, it is such a great honor to be here at the Rose Bowl. Obviously, we want to thank the great city of Dallas and partnering with the Rose Bowl to give us this unique opportunity to play this game. As I had said earlier, it was so important for us to make certain that we got our players' parents to be part of this special game. And again, I want to thank the college football playoffs for making this happen. And so, on behalf of Notre Dame, a real big thank you for putting this together to allow our student athletes the opportunity to really be celebrated by their families to be at this game here at AT&T Stadium. So once again, thank you to the Rose Bowl, Capital One, and certainly college football playoffs, and as I said, the great city of Dallas giving us this opportunity to play this game. Now on to the game. We're very excited to be back here, and this is for us a journey that we've been on since June. Our players have gone through, like all other teams that have been on this similar journey, through so many things during the pandemic, and I couldn't be more proud of a football team. I'm sure Coach Saban feels the same way, and anybody that's been asked these same questions, how they feel about their football team. This is a unique team, a bond that you build with a team that's unlike any others when you go through the things that we've had to go through relative to COVID and testing and changing your lifestyle and habits. And I just love this team, and I love what they're about, and I can't wait to watch them play. They're going to perform at a high level. They'll need to, because this is an outstanding football team, and again, want to congratulate Alabama for again being here and being part of the playoffs. And we know the challenges in front of us, but we welcome those challenges. That's why we go to work each and every day to put ourselves in this position. And we're going to keep knocking at the door. We don't listen to the narratives about what Notre Dame can and can't do. We're just excited that we're going to keep banging at this door, and we're going to get through. We're going to keep putting ourselves in this position, and we're excited about the opportunity that we've got for us tomorrow. So with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Coach Kelly. As a reminder, please raise your hand to ask a question. When it is your turn, your name will be called, and you can then unmute your microphone. Our first question comes from Chuck Freeby.
Brian, where would you say your team's mindset is going into this game? You've had two really huge games this year with Clemson. How would you compare their mindset going into this game with Alabama to where it was in those games?
Well, I'd say it's much more similar to the first time we played Clemson, right? You know, the second time, look, Clemson beat us. They were the better football team that day. There's no doubt about it. But the mindset was different. And coming into this game, playing in the playoffs, your mindset shifts and changes to one where you know you have to play your very best. And if you don't, you go home. That wasn't the case the second time we played. And unfortunately, it crept into the way we played. No excuses. Clemson was the better team that day. But having said that, I can sense the way we've prepared. This team will play, our football team at Notre Dame will play with a similar mindset that they did, and they'll need to in the first game that we played against Clemson.
Our next question comes from Eric Hansen.
Hey, Coach, a couple things. First, you mentioned that you'd hope to come to a decision on center by Monday's practice. How did that turn out? The second thing is Kyron Williams really accelerated. Once he got to the top of the depth chart, he just kept going.
Yeah.
I wondered if you could describe the relationship between Kyron and Lance and Lance's role and kind of the way that Kyron's developed during the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think both centers are prepared and ready to play. I think that'll be a game time decision. I think Coach Quinn and I and Coach Reese have talked at great length about both of them, and both are extremely capable of playing at the position. I think it's going to be a game time decision, and both could actually play for us. You know, I think the maturation of anybody has to do with relationships, right? And also knowing when their time has come. And both of those things are what we're talking about with Kyron. Kyron knew that it was his time, right? We had the graduation, you know, at that position, and it was his time. But he also he's built a great relationship, and Lance has done a great job of developing that with Kyron. So I think anytime you see a back or any position, not just running back, you know, show themselves in their first year, I think it's the individual who says it's my time and I'm going to go take this, because I think that has to happen first. They have to believe in themselves. And then I think Lance has done a great job in building a strong relationship with Kyron and, quite frankly, all the backs, not just Kyron, because we've seen Chris Tyree play as a true freshman. We've seen Sebo really blossom in his time with all the backs, and I think he does a great job preparing them.
Our next question comes from Joey Blackwell.
Hey, Coach. First off, thank you so much for doing this, and a Happy New Year to you and your family. I had a quick question about, so, you know, you guys started off the season 10-0. How do you keep your team focused from week to week when you're winning from week to week? And on top of that, does a loss to Clemson kind of serve as a means to recalibrate that focus heading into the Rose Bowl?
Yeah, we revert back to a process because, you know, obviously we're coming off, you know, a very successful season the year before, and then an undefeated season in 2018. So, you know, we won 12 consecutive games in 18, undefeated season, and then we come back in 20 and win 10. You have to have a process that allows the team, the organization, everybody associated with it to fall back on that, to check their work, so to speak, from week to week in terms of how are we following our process so we're prepared for anything that comes our way. And so I think we do a really good job of not thinking about outcomes as much as we think about what our process is and how we do that on a day-to-day basis. You know, how we eat, how we sleep, what decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis as it relates to going to class. And I think all those go to a process that we have in place that our guys have done a really, really good job of following through on.
Our next question comes from Chris Daly.
Brian, congrats on yet another great season here. So Notre Dame is not just a great football school, but it's great academically as well. You ranked highest amongst the top 10 teams in graduation percentage. So how difficult does this make recruiting when you're limited to only a certain amount of kids?
There are challenges. You know, we'd like to have Notre Dame maybe be in a warmer weather climate area too, if we could arrange that too. But these are the challenges that we embrace. We embrace the challenges because it gets us, a student athlete that is committed to the academics of a great university like Notre Dame. So, we've embraced these challenges. And we've taken them, and we've still won football games, and we've still done it with great graduation rates. And I think we've shown that you can do it. You can do it with great student athletes, with challenges geographically in recruiting, and still have an opportunity to win a national championship. So we're proud of that.
Our next question comes from John Finneran.
Morning, Brian. I wondered
Morning,
if
John.
you could share some thoughts and things that you've seen that maybe we haven't seen about Ian Book and the way he goes about preparing for games, going through the season, his relationship with players and coaches and things like that. Little things that we don't know that speak of who he is.
That's a tough question, John, because you guys know everything. So I don't know how, I'm kidding, obviously. But you opened yourself up to that. I would say the things about Ian in particular would be his personality, the way he comes into the building every day. You would think that he won the lottery. Upbeat, positive, interacting with everybody, from the person that's serving food to the person that is spraying and cleaning in the building, support staff. It doesn't matter who. He brings in such an energy on a day-to-day basis, and that's kind of what people don't see about him, and that's why he's so respected and loved by everybody, and why everybody pulls for him. And if there's a negative thing to say about him, it's kind of like, well, say it to me, because we've got Ian's back. And because he brings that on a day-to-day basis, regardless of what happened to him or how he feels, he brings that energy every single day.
Our next question comes from AP Stedham.
Hey, good morning, Coach Kelly.
Good morning.
Coach, did you have any interest in recruiting Jaleel Billingsley, the number 19 tight end from Alabama? And has the tight end always been a preference in your offense? You have a great group yourself.
Yeah, he's a fine player. I can't recall where he fell on our board in particular. There are so many factors, but we knew about him and know how fine of a player he is. The tight end happens to be an area that we've had great success going back to 2010 with Kyle Rudolph and Tyler Eifert and Troy Nicholas. I mean, Durham Smythe. We continue to, turn out great tight ends each and every year. Cole Kmet's our latest. There's just so many, and I'm missing a couple, unfortunately, that have played for us as well. I can't think of everybody at this time, and that's a good thing. But because of that, in developing tight ends, we've got a lot of young men that want to come to Notre Dame to play the tight end position because we utilize them. And you could see that in our offense today, right? We're using 2 and 3 tight ends quite a bit. And so, people, tight ends are quite attracted from the high school ranks and seeing the utilization and how they can develop in our program at the tight end position.
Thank you, Coach.
Our next question comes from Pete Sampson.
Brian, you had mentioned challenges, and you can embrace challenges or try to push back against them and maybe change them. And I'm curious, since the last time you played Alabama in the BCS championship, how your perspective on challenges around Notre Dame has changed, embracing them maybe more opposed to trying to change what Notre Dame is, and if you think that's been a big part of the success really over the last 4 years.
Yeah, Pete, I think so. I mean, look, we're not going to change at our core who we are in terms of, the student athlete and the premium on the student athlete in terms of what the right fit here. I think you know that. You follow us as closely as anybody. But I do believe that there is some merit to the fact that you're not going to fight, who we are in terms of the recruiting process. I think once you decide that, look, these guys fit, you can then go and make the case for those young men that are going to do the right things at the university. And maybe if they fall a little bit below the line relative to, some of the numbers that you need here at the university, they make up for with outstanding traits. They're great in the community. They're going to be great representatives of the university. And I think you embrace it from that perspective. They've got great emotional intelligence. So I think there are other ways to really embrace that than strictly saying, well, he doesn't meet this criteria relative to a particular GPA or test score. But what about his character? And really, digging in deep about that. And I think embracing that and understanding that there's guys out there that can meet it from that perspective certainly helps quite a bit. And I think really that this pandemic has given us another glimpse at how we can build earlier relationships, even through Zooming and FaceTime before they even get to our campus. And we saw that with this recruiting class, which I think is going to help us moving forward, that it doesn't always have to be, hey, we got to get them on campus. Yeah, we know we're in South Bend, Indiana. It's, it's not the first destination on everybody's map, but when you do get here, it's a beautiful campus. But we can do so much more work now, having gone through what we've gone through this past year, by touching these families a lot sooner, through Zooming and FaceTime.
As a reminder, if you have a question for Coach Kelly, please raise your hand. Our next question comes from Ron Wallace.
Good morning, Coach.
Morning, Ron.
Ron Wallace here with Ball Down South. You had a good season this year. Only loss came to Clemson. If you guys were able to make it to the title game, and Clemson made it to the title game after winning the Sugar Bowl, what would it mean to you and your team to have another shot at Clemson and at that national title?
We'd love it. I mean, rubber games are what it's all about, right? Each team wins one, you settle it with the rubber game, and that would be a great scenario. We've got a great Alabama team that we've got to handle first, and that's where our focus and energy is. And if Clemson's fortunate enough to beat Ohio State, we would love that. What's important now for us is how we perform against Alabama, but what's important next would be a matchup against Clemson or Ohio State. It doesn't really matter to us. We'll take either one of them.
Our next question comes from George Bashura.
Good morning, Coach, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, George.
It was a great segment into my question with the WIN acronym. That kind of worked for the team all season. How does the WIN acronym, what's important now, what's important next, work as the window tightens on the season?
Well, in a lot of different ways. What's important now is certainly, our focus, not being distracted by, our guys going to the NFL. Are they coming back? When will I get a chance to see my family again? What's the schedule look like next week? When we win, are we off a couple of days? So you can understand that acronym in relative terms doesn't necessarily always evolve around football or around anything that can distract any of us, right? And that being a schedule, for example. And our guys need to know sometimes, what's next, as well as what's the next 24 hours look like. So it applies in so many areas when we're dealing with young men that want to know, what's the next 14 days look like for me. Am I going home? Are we staying here for Christmas? What's the schedule look like? Those are important conversations to have as well.
Our next question comes from Eric Hansen.
Back for seconds, Brian. Dalen Hayes was one game just perfectly with that shoulder injury last year. If it had been one more game, he wouldn't have been able to come back.
Right.
What will you remember about his second chance of kind of having a final chapter there at Notre Dame?
Yeah, great question. Embracing a second chance in a way that he really, I think, opened himself up to being complete as a football player and as a person. He wanted to, I think, reach his potential, and I don't mean just as a football player, but as a person. I think he opened up himself to being vulnerable as a player and as a person, and we saw the growth of a young man in this past year that is, for me, why we get into this business, right? To see young men grow up the way he has, and grow up to be a captain and a leader of our football team. And so, just a great chapter, and one as a coach, you live for those moments.
Thank you.
If you have a question for Coach Kelly, please raise your hand in the Zoom chat. Our next question comes from Sean Fitzgerald.
Hey, Coach. Just wondering, what are the challenges that defending someone like Devonta Smith? What are the challenges defending a player like that?
Well, first of all, they do a great job. I mean, Coach Sarkisian does a great job of utilizing formations and motions, and really putting them in a very good position, and really taking advantage of some matchups that can be problematic for you. So I would say, first and foremost, a lot of credit to the way offensively they're utilizing magnificent players. As it relates to him specifically, he can do a little bit of everything. I think the first thing everyone thinks about is explosiveness, which he is. Great ball catcher, tight windows, it doesn't matter. Great concentration, route runner. He's just a complete player, and I think they use him so well, and so smart in the way they use him to get great matchups. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think they should get a lot of credit. I think Coach Sarkisian should get a lot of credit in the way they have used him in particular. I don't know where he came in the starting lineup on the start of the year. I don't know if he was the featured guy or not, but to kind of transform into the featured guy through the season the way he has is a credit to him and the coaches.
Our next question comes from Pete Sampson.
Brian, I want to ask you quickly about the defensive coordinator hunt whenever the season ends.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have a timeline for that, but also I was also curious, is consistency in scheme your first priority there, considering the success of the defense and how you've recruited it over 4 years?
Yeah, we'll get moving on it, pretty quickly. I mean, obviously, there's some competitiveness involved in this. There are other openings for coordinators' positions, so we can't be sitting on our hands, as we look around the country or even internally. I mean, we have to be able to look at this from a perspective of, there's candidates out there that are being looked at by other schools as well. So I've got to have that in mind. So, relative to the process, we've got to be on top of it. As you know, a lot of this will begin in its beginning stages through Zoom and FaceTime because of where we are with the pandemic, and then you're probably closing after that by bringing somebody on campus. So that, in fact, has changed a little bit. So we've already begun putting those kind of protocols together for the interviewing process. As it relates to scheme itself, we've recruited to a base 4 down. That doesn't mean we can't play 3 down, because we do. We, as you know, in our nickel and dime package, we're primarily in a 3 down package. So as long as the system can marry with our recruiting, that's the most important thing. As long as it marries with the recruiting that we've been doing over the last 3 and 4 years, I'm open to what the system looks like. It doesn't necessarily have to be, always 4 down. We can be in some 3 down and some 4 down, but it can't be. We're not going to a 3-4 defense, and that's not going to happen. We will be a team that is continuously looking at our personnel that we've been recruiting to match the scheme. So, long story short, you'll still consider. You'll still see some 4 down, and you'll still see 3 down, which is pretty much what's going on, except for some that have gone strictly to 3 down to match who they're seeing in their conference. And that's not the case as an independent, where we need to be in 3 down because we're not just seeing spread offenses. You've got to defend the triple option. You've got to defend power offenses. So that's why we'll match it with what we recruit and what our schedule looks like.
Our final question will come from AP Stedham.
Coach, there's always been a long association between Alabama and Notre Dame, dating back to Frank Thomas was the roommate of George Gipp, I believe. Then he was the head football coach at Alabama, coaching Coach Bryant. Coach, you have Jay Bramlett from Tuscaloosa, your punter. Howard Cross the third. His dad, Howard Cross, scored a touchdown against Notre Dame in '86, and then Lance Taylor, the running back coach. How does all those associations materialize?
Well, I think when you talk about historic and tradition, Notre Dame, Alabama, those 2 schools are going to keep coming up. And when you talk about the names that you brought up, they're gonna gravitate towards those great programs. And so I think there are always going to be connections between the great programs in the country, whether it's Alabama and Notre Dame, or it's Notre Dame and USC. There's always going to be some kind of connections, or Alabama and some of the other great programs around the country. Obviously, Alabama and Clemson comes to mind with Dabo. So I think there's always going to be those connections with the great programs throughout the country.
Thank you for joining us today, Coach. And thank you everyone for calling in for today's head coach video conference. As a reminder, the CFP semifinal at the Rose Bowl game presented by Capital One will kick off tomorrow at 3:20 p.m. Central. Transcripts are available from today's call on collegepressbox.com, and video will be available via the CFP media portal. Thank you so much.